Let's go.
Yeah. Order. I call on Hafsana Begum to move the motion.
That this House has considered the matter of tackling violence against women and girls. Sir Mark, it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Violence against women and girls is one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world. The statistics are stark and they are frightening. Globally, almost 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physical or sexual intimate partner violence at least once in their life. As an ongoing survivor of domestic abuse and as chair of the ABPG on domestic abuse and violence, I know that it can affect women at all stages in all aspects of their life. It damages health and well-being and undermines democratic freedom and our pursuit of equality. The phrase tackling violence against women and girls is now frequently used, but I also know that there is often a gap, even a vast gulf, between good intentions professed in this place and the reality of our lives. Urgent and immediate action is overdue. As survivors, we are complex and multifaceted beings, and we are being let down. Therefore, today, I aim to set out why there is a need for a multifaceted approach. We need a comprehensive and cross-departmental strategy beyond criminal justice to social security, to housing, to employment, to health, and so on, to address perpetrators and empower survivors. I want to place on record my recognition to the work of the Minister in this area and know that she has indicated her commitment to rolling out a plan in the new year. I welcome the opportunity to continue to engage constructively with her in the interests of survivors everywhere, and today's debate is aimed to be a part of furthering that common interest. Whilst much of my speech today will be about responses to the problem beyond the criminal justice system, there can be no question that it woefully lets down survivors. Abysmal prosecution and conviction rates, perpetrators being released too early from prison, the crisis in legal aid and the lack of independent legal advice to survivors. The fact that it is estimated that the majority of women in prison and under community supervision have experienced domestic abuse. Mistrust of the police is at an all-time high. Obviously, not dealing properly with abusers in their own ranks undermines trust. As Women's Aid continue to emphasise, policing reforms are urgently needed to rebuild public faith in the institution that is supposed to protect us, but the government's announcements so far do not address the scale of the problem. I'll give way.
I've been made aware by constituents of problems where the family courts have not understood that they can be used to perpetuate abuse by the violent partner. Would the honourable member agree that we need a greater understanding in the family court system in order to ensure that people who are fleeing violence are not seeing that abuse continue?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I agree with her that the situation in the family courts is something that I think every parliamentarian in this House could understand better, to really understand how the law is used and often misused by perpetrators to further the suffering of their victims. I would also like to draw attention to members to the recent work of the Home Affairs Select Committee about rape investigations and prosecutions and non-contact sexual offences, which highlights the need to ensure victims feel confident in reporting offences, knowing that they will be supported and taken seriously. Likewise, the London Victims Commissioner's recent stalking review makes a number of stark findings in relation to both victims' experiences and the response that they receive. It is also very profound in evidencing the disastrous consequences of the confusion and lack of awareness among police and prosecutors, i.e. that police continue to treat incidents as single events, meaning stalking goes unrecognised and patterns of behaviour are not properly understood. So ending impunity by holding perpetrators accountable and establishing zero tolerance of violence against women and girls is imperative. This requires providing support and consideration at every stage of the criminal justice system. Yet not only does the law and court systems let us down, but they can also even be used by our abusers. Now, I'm not going to say much more about this today, as last Thursday there was an opportunity to address my and other women's experiences of lawfare in this regard. However, just as the impact of violence against women and girls is vast and far-reaching, so must be the solution. A whole system approach is therefore vital. During the second reading of the Employment Rights Bill, I raised that domestic abuse can have an impact on an individual's working life, i.e. unexplained absences, lateness, and negatively impacting performance as well. For around 1 in 10 survivors, the abuse continues in the workplace, often as their partner is turning up at their workplace or stalking them outside their workplace, or is an employee or worker in that workplace. The statutory guidance on the Domestic Abuse Act 2021 reminds us of how pivotal the role of an employer can be by providing, for example, flexible working or paid leave. And it's undisputedly the case that in my view, being a member of a trade union is the best way for workers to ensure their rights, and this is certainly the case for survivors. The cost of living crisis is especially dangerous for those faced with a choice that is no choice really, remaining in an unsafe environment or facing destitution or homelessness. Lower incomes, rising poverty and soaring rents mean that people feel trapped in a relationship even when they do need to leave. Safe, affordable housing, including social homes for women and girls escaping, is an urgent necessity, and protection from eviction for survivors is absolutely essential. In fact, domestic abuse is by its very nature a housing issue, with perpetrators often creating a context of fear and curtailed freedom, usually within or association with the home. Indeed, there's a reason that my ex-husband and his supporters are also so focused on my living arrangements and regularly try to use the media in this regard, still all these years after trying the vexatious case that was pursued against me about my own housing arrangements. It is no coincidence that the current violence against women and girls crisis comes after 14 years of attacks on social security. Women are more vulnerable to poverty due to lower incomes and wealth, and because they are more likely to have caring responsibilities. This leaves them more reliant on social security and public services, and means that they are impacted more severely when public services and social security are cut. Disabled women are twice as likely to experience abuse, which is why it is crucial that disabled people receive the support that they need. The Women's Budget Group has argued that economic violence has disregarded the needs of women, reduced the already inadequate services that they rely on, and deprioritised their safety and well-being. Oxfam's publication, The Assault of Austerity, argued that the most common austerity measures have been shown to precipitate both direct and indirect forms of violence against women and girls. There is no doubt about it that the funding crisis for domestic abuse services and other support continues to be catastrophic. Women are dying every day while support services continue to be cut. Refugees, community-based services and specialist support on a broad range of needs are absolutely critical, and the funding of such services can literally be the difference between life and death, hope and despair, imprisonment or empowerment. And yes, it is a matter of urgency, in my view, that the no recourse to public funds rule is scrapped and that there is an end to the hostile environment. The current political climate has created a toxic, dangerous atmosphere for migrant women. Immigration status and the fear of deportation are used as control tactics by perpetrators. This is why there needs to be a firewall between all public services and the Home Office, so that every survivor can report abuse and so that perpetrators cannot evade justice by weaponising immigration status in order to silence, abuse and control. Migrant women, including those who are pregnant, are being detained in immigration detention centres as I speak. This is despite centres like Yarl's Wood being the subject of considerable political and media attention due to the high-profile allegations of sexual abuse and mistreatment over the years. Globally, we know that violence against women and girls continues to be exacerbated by conflicts. In Haiti, women face gang violence, including pervasive sexual violence, and in Sudan, the reports of mass rapes are horrific. And in Gaza, women and girls are being bombarded, killed, and starved. So tackling violence against women and girls must include a ceasefire and stopping all UK arms to be sent to Israel or anywhere else to kill women. It is therefore important to understand that violence against women and girls can affect individuals of all backgrounds. However, sadly, society itself does not treat all survivors equally. Not only can the power and control that abuser wields to perpetrate abuse interact with a range of experiences of oppression, but systemic discrimination can also make it harder for individuals to seek help. I'll give way to them.
And also for securing such an important debate. Now, following the White Ribbon Day and during Islamophobia Awareness Month, we must address the unique challenges faced by the Muslim women, who often experience a triple whammy: gender-based violence, Islamophobia, and discrimination. These intersecting issues can prevent women from seeking help. So will the member join me in stressing to the government that services should be equipped to address these specific barriers and to challenge the harmful stereotypes that perpetuate both violence and discrimination?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I completely agree with him and greatly value him raising this point during Islamophobia Awareness Month. Fears of discrimination or bias such as racism, homophobia or transphobia are exacerbated by incidents of people being denied assistance and services. Black and Asian survivors are more likely to mistrust the police, and whilst Black and Asian people are over-policed for certain crimes, domestic abuse tends to be under-policed in minority communities due to so-called cultural sensitivity. So when speaking out about my experiences, I've been particularly anxious to not participate in perpetuating tired racist tropes about Muslims, for example. I think we all need to be clear that this does nothing to empower women. Rather, racism is a driver and facilitator of abuse, leading to the voices and lives of ethnic minority women overlooked and devalued. It is fundamentally important that any violence against women and girls strategy must be actively anti-racist. So, Mark, it is impossible to cover all the types of violence against women and girls in the time that I have today. Nevertheless, I try to set out examples to illustrate that violence against women and girls is not a side or separate issue, but at its core is a question of equality and the type of world we live in. It is intrinsically connected to structural discrimination, exploitation, and the intersection of different oppressions. And as such, it requires a joined-up thinking and bold and brave initiatives. As members will be aware, this week began with the UN's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And I want to take this moment to draw out that term activism, because the history of challenging violence against women and girls has always had pioneering activism, fighting for social change at its heart. The movement has been driven by the bravery of so many who spoke out and organised despite the challenges against them. And it is this that keeps me going. Because of them and so many survivors all around the world, I will never ever allow my voice to be silenced. Because human rights are fundamental, and because ultimately tackling violence against women and girls is about the hope of a future where everyone is able to live freely, in dignity, with joy and with pride. Thank you.
Can I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in this debate? I would also like to say everybody can see the large numbers of people here, and we will have less than an hour now, given that the mover of the motion has already spoken, and the fact that front bench spokespeople from the government, the official opposition and the opposition get 10 minutes each. So you don't need to be an expert in maths to work out that you're going to get less than 2 minutes each. So please have cognizance of the fact that any time you go over that, you're taking time off somebody else. And I think we'll be extremely lucky if we can get everybody in to speak that's indicated they wish to speak. Okay, I call Jim Shannon.
So Mark, it's not often I get called for it, but in 2 minutes deadline, and what can you say in 2 minutes? Well, I'll do my best to outline the issues that I want to do. First of all, to the Honourable Lady for Poplar and Limehouse, can I also thank her especially for her personal story that she told last Thursday in the Chamber. There's not one of us wasn't moved by that. Thank you very much for that there. It tells a story. In Northern Ireland, quick facts, the Minister's in her place, and I know that she has a special determination to do things in Northern Ireland. I know that, so when I asked the Honourable Lady, I know that that's already in motion. 6 women have been murdered in Northern Ireland in the last year. 33,071 incidents of domestic abuse in the last year. 800 women and children referred to the Women's Aid in the last year. 10 babies born in those Women's Aid places in the last year. I refer people, unfortunately, Sir Mark, on a number of occasions to Women's Aid for the help, and I really want to put on record my appreciation and thanks for them for all that they do. In Northern Ireland, the Health and Justice Department has launched the Domestic and Sexual Abuse Strategy for Northern Ireland. An abuse incident is reported to police every 16 minutes in Northern Ireland, and a sexual offence every 2 hours in Northern Ireland. Absolutely horrendous when you think of that. And when women come into the office, in my office, with black eyes or unexplained injuries, it's very clear what's happening, and it's very clear that we must be able to respond very, very quickly. So what do we want to do? We must support the victims, strengthen the children who are impacted by the abuse, and seek to raise generations of young women who know what to accept, and young men who know how they are to act with women. Violence will not be tolerated and hidden by the darkness. We come into this light to say that this nation will not turn away and will not stay silent, and will work to secure a safer future for my granddaughters and all the women and children in this UK. I know that my wife Sandra and I strove to raise sons who respected women, and all three have settled down with equally strong and lovely young women. And I'm very, very pleased to have this debate. The Honourable Lady deserves congratulations. I look very much forward to what the Minister has to say, and also the shadows as well. Thank you so much. That's 9 seconds for somebody else.
Thank you, and it'd be great if everybody could follow Mr Shellon's example. Can I call Steve Witherden?
I thank the honourable member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this crucial debate and for her exceptional dedication to tackling violence against women and girls. UN Women's latest femicide report reveals that the home is now the most dangerous place for a woman to be globally. For far too long, domestic homicide has been treated as an unavoidable tragedy. But in the UK, a woman is murdered by a man every 3 days. 62% of these women are killed by their partner or ex-partner, often in brutal and unimaginable ways, and many of them in front of their children. Given these harrowing statistics, the government must confront domestic homicide for what it truly is, a national emergency. I fully support our ambition to halve violence against women and girls within a decade, and education must play a vital role in achieving this. Raising awareness of domestic violence in schools is crucial. For decades, road and fire safety has been taught in schools, yet the harsh reality is that women are 50 times more likely to be injured by their partner than in a house fire, and more than 3 times as likely to be killed by a partner than by not wearing a seatbelt. Despite this, research from Women's Aid shows that 4 in 5 people in Britain don't believe the scale of domestic abuse in the UK is greater than that of a car accident or house fire. Educating young people about the true severity of domestic violence is a key part of prevention work. The culture of inequality and misogyny, often rooted in harmful masculine norms, contributes to the widespread tolerance of domestic abuse.
Will the honourable gentleman give way very briefly?
I will give way.
I'm grateful. As a family lawyer for so many years before I came here, I found that some children, some as young as 13, felt it absolutely normal to be hit by their boyfriends. And does the honourable gentleman agree with me that educating, which he's referring to, our young people, girls and boys, about the importance of respecting themselves and others is a key part to eradicating violence across the board?
Could I thank the honourable member for her intervention? And yes, I 100% agree. I think the role of education cannot be understated, fundamentally important. Thank you.
Can I just say before we continue that I would appreciate it as well as if people can desist if they can help it from interventions, because they take a lot of time away from people who are down to speak and wish to speak later on. Thanks.
Schools must be equipped to teach boys and young men to hold themselves accountable to women and to each other. This is essential to beginning the work of dismantling these toxic cultures and creating safer environments for all. Empowering young people with the knowledge and skills to challenge inequalities and change harmful norms would enable meaningful progress in preventing domestic violence. What discussions has the Minister, who I know is deeply committed to ending violence against women and girls, had with colleagues in the Department for Education about making awareness-raising and prevention work on domestic violence and domestic homicide a priority in schools? And how is the government supporting schools to tackle domestic violence at its core? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I call Liz Saville-Roberts.
Violence happen in the workplace, yet protections for workers are limited. The Worker Protection Act 2023 is a laudable effort, creating a preventable duty for employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. But as enforcement can only take place after an experience of sexual harassment, this Act is limited in its protection of workers from different forms of violence. We need more robust measures and better employer accountability. The brilliant teams at the Susie Lamplugh Trust and Rights of Women agree, and together we are presenting a bill that seeks to do just that, the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 Amendment Bill. My presentation bill would address a gap in the law after the UK ratified the International Labour Organisation's Convention 190 in 2022. It introduces clear, actionable duties for employers to protect workers from violence and harassment through risk assessments, policy development and training. And it brings sexual harassment and violence into protections already in place for health and safety at work and under, importantly, the regulatory oversight of the Health and Safety Executive, which will be mandated to create an enforceable framework holding employers to account. All means should be at our disposal to both mitigate and, of course, ultimately stop gender-based harm. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 already places a duty on employers to ensure health and safety and welfare of employees at work. But it is 50 years old and it does not explicitly mention gender-based violence. Harnessing the toughest mechanism we have in the workplace would establish a structured approach to safeguarding women at work and make a tangible difference. I would be very grateful if the Minister could respond at the close of this debate to this proposed bill. With 12 seconds to go.
Well done.
I call Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure to serve your chair today. I want to thank the member for Popular and Limehouse for securing this important debate. On Monday, we marked White Ribbon Day, a global campaign to end violence against women and girls, and the statistics are stark. Every 10 minutes, a woman is killed by a partner or family member somewhere in the world, and in the UK, a woman is killed by an abusive partner every 5 days. The police receive a call related to domestic abuse every 30 seconds, and by the time I finish this speech, 4 women will have made that call. The data paints a clear picture, and everyone in this room will know a woman who has been affected by this issue, and sadly it's on the rise. The theme of this year's White Ribbon Day is It Starts With Men, and it starts here with men calling out unacceptable misogyny and violence. In Gloucester, domestic abuse and sexual assault reached record levels last year, and across the county we saw an increase of nearly 2,000 more domestic abuse-related crimes. Earlier this month I held a roundtable with local organisations like the Holly Gazzard Trust, Fear Free and GDAS to discuss how we can tackle violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and stalking in Gloucester. The issue is complex, but we must prevent violence against women, ensure that women are supported to leave domestically abusive relationships and provide the support needed for women facing all types of gender-based violence and stalking. I'm pleased that the government is committed to halving violence against women within a decade, and I'm pleased that the government is working to improve police responses and ensure faster justice for survivors. As well as the recent introduction of workplace sexual harassment laws, I welcome new protections for victims of stalking and to make spiking a criminal offence, something which I know my predecessor worked hard on. All of these measures will help keep my constituents safe and ensure the women of Gloucester feel safe and supported. Together, we can create a society where women and girls are no longer subjected to fear, abuse or violence. Together, we can end violence against women and girls. Thank you.
I call Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. This is a very important debate where we've acknowledged the scale of the issue and the epidemic of violence that women face every single day.
Because of time, I just wanted to highlight 3 crucial points domestically and also reflect briefly on the international situation. Firstly, we have to invest in organisations on the front line and support them. In Norwich, there are many excellent local organisations that are working on this, including Leeway, the Sue Lambert Trust and Dawn's New Horizon, and I draw attention to my register of interests. I pay tribute to them, and it would be good to hear from the Minister, particularly how we are supporting those organisations. Secondly, the criminal justice system. Last week in the House, I raised the unacceptable weights that women in Norfolk are facing. We all know the pain and distress that causes and also the impact it can have on the outcome of court cases. And I want to welcome the focus that our Police and Crime Commissioner, Sarah Taylor, has put on this issue. Thirdly, we must have a holistic approach that tackles misogyny at its root. That includes in schools and tackling the promotion and hosting of harmful content online, and I welcome the steps that this government has made in that regard. As I said, I want to turn just finally to the international context, having worked in international development for many years before joining this Parliament. Violence is happening everywhere, as the United Nations has highlighted. To mention 2 specific areas, in Afghanistan, reports have highlighted the scale of gender-based violence under the Taliban. And as the Malala Fund has highlighted, Afghan women and girls find themselves being denied basic freedoms, going to school, walking in the park, having a haircut. They, alongside many experts and activists, are calling for this situation to be recognised by world leaders as gender apartheid. I know it's not specifically her area, but can I urge us to do everything that we can, because the international community is letting women and girls down. And secondly, in Sudan, this week the UN Humanitarian Chief highlighted an epidemic of sexual violence. I'm a member of the International Development Committee, and we heard that again reiterated this week. I welcome the steps that the government has made in this regard, the doubling of our aid package, but we have to do more. So to conclude, as we have heard, we need a multifaceted approach, and we need to be bold and tackle violence against women and girls wherever it occurs. Thank you very much.
I call Jess Sato.
Congratulations to the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this important debate. Having worked for charity supporting women and girls for the best part of a decade, I'm undeniably passionate about this issue. All of us here know why it is so important. We've all met the victims and survivors, those abused by the ones they love. Girls who shake off the unwanted sexual images sent to them on the way to school. The women who are trafficked and pimped into prostitution. We know the situation we face, and I'm glad this government has made a landmark commitment to halve violence against women and girls. Conscious of time, so I wish to raise just 2 issues which I hope the Minister might address. Firstly, I remain concerned that vulnerable women who have fled their abusers and found a new home in a refuge continue to have their addresses disclosed through court documents, opening them up to being tracked down by their abusers and making those refuges close. I believe this was a measure which the previous government, to their credit, tackled, but the problem appears not to have gone away entirely. Secondly, I am concerned about the financial situation facing local specialist charities, many of which have been forced to close due to a lack of funding, and the huge gaps in support as shown by the Domestic Abuse Commissioner's mapping report in 2022, which found that most victims could not access the support they wanted. What we need is a new statutory duty to commission services for domestic abuse and sexual violence victims, both adults and children, to end the postcode lottery and ensure that vulnerable people are not left to fend for themselves. And the same applies to interventions for perpetrators. To halve violence against women and girls, we need to focus on the root cause, men's violence against women and girls. I know how dedicated the Minister is and how long she has campaigned to end VAUG. I look forward to working with her, the Honourable Member who brought this debate, and all our colleagues from all parties to make our commitment to halving VAUG a reality. Thank you.
I call Alison Hume.
Thank you, Sir Mark. May I also thank the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this important debate. In my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby, Scarborough has the highest rate of domestic incidents per 1,000 head of population at 15.7 recorded in North Yorkshire. One of my constituents, who I'll call Anna, but this is not her real name, came to see me to tell me what happened to her. I commend her for bravery and honesty. Anna suffered abuse of the most extreme kind from her ex-partner, including an attempt at strangulation. She applied for and was granted a restraining order, but it was ignored by the perpetrator and the order was not enforced. At a pre-trial hearing, the judge came to an agreement out of court. Despite Anna passing out, it was decided that it was pressure on her neck and not strangulation. Anna's attacker was given a suspended sentence and ordered to undertake a relationship building course with the probation service. Anna lives in fear of what he might do to her or other women at the workplace where he's employed, who of course have no knowledge about his violent past. Anna's experiences of the criminal justice system have taken a toll on her, leaving her without the strength to ask for a review from the court or the police. My constituent's case is far from untypical. Yes. A study by Women's Aid of the Family Courts published last week also found that survivors overwhelmingly felt their experiences had been made worse by the justice system. We must do better. I look forward to hearing from the Minister today how we can support people like Anna, and I commend Anna for her bravery in speaking out.
Hear, hear.
I call Andrew Cooper.
Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I commend the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this extremely important debate on which she speaks with real authority. This is a pervasive problem that we simply cannot afford to ignore, and it's our responsibility to tackle it head-on. We must use every lever available to us to target the perpetrators and address the root causes of this heinous abuse and violence. This requires a comprehensive approach that does not centre on punishment alone. We must implement a holistic response that delivers justice and protection for survivors, effective prevention and education that challenges the harmful social attitudes, inequality and discrimination that underpins the abuse of women, the abuse that women and girls face. This is essential if we are to achieve our landmark mission to halve violence against women and girls in a decade and break the cycle of violence. With the time I have, I'd like to focus on stalking, and we must recognise that stalking is a form of violence that can have devastating effects on victims, both physically and emotionally, and has not been treated with the seriousness that it deserves in recent years. It's imperative that we elevate our response to stalking, ensuring that victims feel supported and protected, and that appropriate interventions are provided to perpetrators. I'm proud that Winsford, in my constituency, is home to the Cheshire Harm Reduction Unit, which enables police, health professionals and the probation service to work collaboratively within an integrated multi-agency unit to manage the risks associated with stalking and to support victims. Last week I visited the HRU with my honourable friend, the Minister. During the visit, we saw firsthand the nationally leading specialist work undertaken by the unit to support victims of stalking and bring offenders to justice, as well as the preventative measures they take to try and reduce offending in perpetrators. The HRU epitomises the best practice response to stalking, and I believe it is vitally important that their work is replicated and rolled out to every police force area across the country and extended to include the prison service, so that the work of changing behaviour continues before offenders are released.
Can I call Jas Athwell?
Thank you, Mr. Mark. It's a privilege to serve under your chairmanship, and can I thank the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this very important debate. In my constituency of Ilford South, we know all too well of the terrible consequences of misogyny and rape culture, which enables the perpetuation of violence against women and girls. In 2022, our neighbour Zara was walking home from Ilford Town Centre when she was brutally murdered just minutes from her front door. Zara was much loved by her friends, her family and the community as a whole. She had a bright future ahead of her, which was so callously stolen from her. Nothing will ease the pain and suffering of all those who loved Zara, but in her memory, her family have fought relentlessly to prevent further violence against women and girls. No one should have to endure what Zara endured. The stark reality is, as has been mentioned, one woman is murdered every 3 days in the UK. Every single day, women and girls are suffering from systemic rape culture, which normalises, overlooks and excuses sexual violence and the abuse of women. Violence against women and girls is a national emergency. We know that violence does not exist in a vacuum. Society tolerates harassment, leering, casual misogyny, sexist jokes, creating an environment which fosters the hatred of women, normalises abuse and ultimately leads to violence. Jordan McSweeney, who murdered Zara Alina, but first he accrued 28 convictions for 69 separate offences dating back 17 years. Yet despite this, Jordan McSweeney's history of violence, he was categorised as medium risk and allowed to roam the streets seeking another victim. McSweeney's categorisation as a medium risk was not only but is a stark reminder of the grave consequences of underplaying this serious crime. Will the Minister please agree that the violence against women and girls is a national emergency and we must tackle the misogyny and rape culture that leads to abuse? Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Yem.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. My constituency is classed as the most dangerous major town in Nottinghamshire, and by far the most common crimes are violence and sexual offences. And Mansfield, like much of the rest of the UK, is victim to very deeply rooted misogynistic beliefs and social norms that allows this violence against women and girls to proliferate. And in the time I have, I'd like to welcome some of the valuable work and initiatives already ongoing in my community, particularly by Mansfield District Council and Notts Police, particularly around their Safer Streets and the Police and Crime Commissioner's Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. As a proud father to 3 women, I recognise the privilege I've had throughout my own life. Simply being a man has protected me from navigating those gender-based challenges that are ever present in the lives of girls and women. For example, I don't know the feeling of silently suffering from sexual harassment in school, the effects that it could have on my education, or being scared to walk alone at night with the constant need to check over my shoulder. Does the Minister agree with me that not only is there great value in putting the voices and experience of women and girls at the centre of our work, but equally every one of us has to acknowledge the responsibility that we have in tackling this issue?
Thank you. I call Michelle Welsh.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for bringing this really important debate here today. The matter of tackling violence against women and girls is one of the most important issues of this generation. We know that globally 1 in 3 women will face domestic abuse. In the UK, 97% of young women have been sexually harassed, and over 1 million violence against women and girls related crimes were recorded by the police in 22 to 23. This equates to about 3,000 offences each day. I know that everyone will know someone who has been affected or even have their own stories to tell. We must tackle violence against women and girls at its root cause if we are ever to reduce it or eradicate it. This starts with social norms and attitudes towards women. It's tackling catcalling, hatred of women, sexist remarks, the normalisation of violence against women in the media, harassing and stalking. I could go on. I know that sometimes tackling violence on women and girls can sometimes feel like an endless task, but I wanted to raise some of the amazing work that's happening across the country, including in Nottinghamshire. Communities Inc and Nottinghamshire Women's Aid have developed a Stand By Her programme, focusing on exploring attitudes and behaviours that contribute to harassment, abuse and violence against women and girls. Stand By Her aims to change social norms and prevent men's violence against women in Nottinghamshire. Training has been carried out across schools, workplaces and organisations, and by the end of the year, 4,000 staff members in Nottinghamshire Police would have been trained. We all must play our part in prevention. This means stopping violence against women and girls before it occurs by tackling the root cause of the problem. Women and girls should not live in fear. Violence against women and girls is never acceptable, never excusable and never tolerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Call Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Sir Chair. Every woman has a story and every woman knows how to carry her keys as a weapon. Any other extremism and murders on this scale would be front page news every single day. And what we are seeing instead is language like incels and red pill to hide what's actually going on with our young men and boys. People like Andrew Tate, who very openly say, if you put yourself in a position to be raped, you must bear some responsibility. He discussed how you should fight women and you should grip her up by the neck in a video viewed 1.6 million times. 8 out of 10 boys between 16 and 18 have either read, listened or watched Andrew Tate. And they have a positive view of him. They think Andrew Tate wants them to be real men, and he gives good advice. This is the core of the issue. Some people will say that this has always been the issue. It's always been an issue, yes, but not at this scale. Young men's attitudes are more misogynistic and violent than their elders. Only half of young men between 18 and 24 recognise that rape can still happen if the victim doesn't resist or fight back. Less than half of them think that if a man has been drinking or taking drugs, he's still responsible if he rapes someone. And less than if somebody says they want to meet online, most young men think that they deserve sex as a result. So in our 16 days of activism, yes, it starts with men. But it's also for men's sake, because this toxic masculinity is what's causing problems across our society. But it's also for the lives of our women and girls. Thank you.
Call Tony Vaughan.
It's a privilege to speak under your chairship, Sir Mark, and I congratulate my honourable friend for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this incredibly important debate. I am ashamed that on average one woman is killed by an abusive male partner or ex-partner every 5 days in England and Wales. This violence has to stop, and we must all play our part, especially men. I want to think about this issue in relation to the attitudes of young men, as my colleague for Milton Keynes Central has just done. I'm the father of 2 boys, and I'm deeply concerned by the social media influencers and YouTubers who promote misogynistic attitudes and behaviours towards women. Algorithms push this vile material onto impressionable young minds. As the member for Milton Keynes Central just said, notions of consent to sex have been entirely distorted. We need to obviously understand better the causes of misogyny, but in my view, the concept of masculinity needs to be rescued from the toxic clutches of these self-interested, corrupt influencers such as Andrew Tate. The popular idea of masculinity must include the qualities of compassion, empathy, solidarity and cooperation. All too often there is a chain reaction where isolated young men become manipulated by influencers. I just want to raise also the question of women who lack the right kind of immigration status or who do not have any status. The system currently makes it much harder for those women to leave an abusive situation because the policy, the Migrant Victims of Domestic Violence concession, excludes many domestic violence survivors from its protection based on their immigration status. I pay tribute to the work of Southall Black Sisters who have tirelessly campaigned on this issue and with whom I've worked on this issue. And I would ask the Minister, for whom I thank her work on this issue for very many years, what the Government intends to do to level the playing field for that group of women, as well as what steps the Government is taking to educate young men about the causes and consequences of misogyny and to call it out. Thank you, Chair.
Hear, hear. Call John Slinger.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak under your chairship, Sir Mark, and I congratulate my honourable friend from Poplar and Limehouse for bringing forward such an important debate. I want to touch briefly on an example of a young woman in my constituency of Rugby who told me that during one walk across town she'd been subjected to 2 separate incidents of catcalling. She was angry and upset and she felt there was nothing that she could do. Rather like the concept in law that someone can be a victim of assault when attacked with words, not just physical force, so we should consider, as I'm sure we would all agree, the catcall as a form of sexual violence against women and girls. I know that the Minister wrote earlier this month to the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee to confirm that she supports research into examining the potential links between a broader range of non-contact sexual offences and subsequent offences. And I'm confident that the Minister will agree that we must engage both in a shift towards proper enforcement, despite evidential challenges in this area, but also a cultural shift among men. Catcalling is not a low-level offence, and it's certainly not a bit of harmless fun. We also must consider that the men who do not do catcalls must also take action. We must call out catcalling. So enforcement and cultural improvements are linked. And when the Protection from Sex-Based Harassment in Public Act 2023 comes into force, I hope that there will be some prompt convictions. I hope for that because I hope that it sends a strong message that, as with our announcement today on antisocial behaviour, men will no longer be able to create a toxic, demeaning, threatening environment for our women and girls going about their lives. For it's they and all law-abiding citizens who own the streets, not catcalling misogynists.
Thank you. Annalisa Midgley.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for Poplar and Limehouse for bringing this important debate and also for her bravery. In Knowsley, domestic violence is a massive issue with over 3,500 incidents reported each year, and we know so many more incidents are not reported. Most of the victims are women, over 85%, and the majority of men are the perpetrators. They often turn to people and institutions that they trust, like doctors, teachers and other frontline services. Does the Minister agree that we need to break down the silos between government departments so that public bodies and agencies can spot signs of abuse and are trained to offer help at victims at the point that they are ready to receive it?
I call.
Thank you, and my honourable friend, for calling this debate. I've been told online I'm not pretty enough to be worth raping. I don't go into some bars in Bournemouth because I don't feel safe. These were the words of a young woman at Bournemouth University Student Union Q&A who I met last week. When I'm heading home, I have one AirPod in so I can talk to my mum on the phone in case anything happens, and the other out so I can hear what's going on. These were the words of a young girl from 22nd Bournemouth Girl Guides and Rangers who I met last Friday. I wear my hair in a ponytail but my hood up because I don't want someone to grab my ponytail, pull me into a hedge and rape me. These were the words of another young woman from Charminster who I spoke with recently. Alison from Moordown feels unsafe as a woman in the town centre. Desiree from Eastcliff doesn't go out once it gets dark because she's too vulnerable. 50% of our population in Bournemouth and Britain are changing who they are and how they live their lives, and they're being forced to do this. And the response to a new social media video by AFC Bournemouth has been striking. The video shows how a walk home from the football might not be the same for everyone because street lighting can be so low. Enough is enough. The latest annual figures in Dorset show that 723 offences of a rape of a female took place, yet in that year ending June 2024, there were 36 prosecutions and 14 convictions for rape. That's not acceptable in any way, shape or form, and we have to stop this. So I want to commend the BCP organisations working to support victims of domestic abuse, BCHA, the Water Lily Project, Victim Support and STARS. I just want to close by saying that the focus should always be on the victim survivor and the children who live with domestic abuse every day. But we who have worked in the world of domestic abuse know that if public policy continues to ignore the abusive partner, we can't really address the roots of abuse. So I would ask the Minister what she will be doing and her department will be doing to provide more perpetrator programmes in our country as part of her Nouveau strategy. And I just want to close by saying that I welcome the Labour government's commitment to halving the incidence of violence against women and girls. I know too that this will be the tip of the iceberg, and as more people report crimes, there will be many more people who need support.
Call Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate. Yesterday I had the pleasure of launching a new report, Why Should Our Rage Be Tidy? Minorised survivors' experiences of mental health in the context of violence abuse. I hope that the Minister has a copy. If not, I'll make sure she gets one. They've got some excellent recommendations. Khan is the producer with Women and Girls Network, and it's received UKRI funding. The thing is, when we hear the statistics, 1 woman in every 3 days, you do think to yourself, when is that going to change and how are we going to change this? This report will help. But also the Level Up campaign in regards to IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organisation. We need an amendment to the Editor's Code so that when they're reporting on domestic abuse and murders of missing women, that it's not sensationalised like they normally do. This needs to change. It's inaccurate, it's undignifying, and it prioritises the sensationalisation of it and the negative framing of victims like they deserved it. And I want to see words like sexism, misogyny, extremism and terrorism when it comes to describing violent men, not jilted partners. That just will not do. So I do hope that the Minister will have a look at this report and together, all of us working together, that we will begin to move in the direction of eradicating violence against women and girls.
Old Jill Furness.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairpersonship, Sir Mark. And I want to thank the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this debate during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Due to the nature of domestic violence, the data available to us will never fully record the extent of the abuse, but we do know that there were a minimum of 2.2 million victims last year. To me, these numbers are clear evidence that the issue is endemic, and I am sick and tired of seeing women and girls facing the same threats of violence and abuse every day. This is often framed as women's issues, something we need to be aware of in case of our actions are somehow responsible for men's behaviour. And I say men because the reality is that the vast majority of violence against women is clearly committed by men. I was proud to stand on a manifesto that committed to halving violence against women and girls within a decade, and I'm pleased that ministers are treating this a cross-departmental problem and have established a ministerial board on tackling violence against women and girls. However, combating the epidemic will require specialist local services and charities, but as every member of this House knows, our councils are facing extreme budget pressures thanks to our austerity. When faced with such a grim economic future, the vast majority of council spending goes towards fulfilling the provision of their statutory legal obligations. I did want to speak about a Sheffield charity called Vida, which is very close to my heart, which had been running for nearly 30 years. Sadly, Sheffield Vida recently announced their closure. They had been relying on an emergency grant from National Lottery these last few months and had applied for funding from the Home Office and Suicide Prevention Fund to continue their work. Vida estimated they save about £50,000 a month with their complex mental health service. I fear that the burden on the surviving mental health and therapy service in Sheffield will only increase with the loss of Vida. These barriers are only more pronounced from those from minoritised communities. The Minister, I have total regard and know how tenacious and committed our Minister is. So I'm sure she will come back, will listen to all of us and come back with very good responses. Thank you.
Call Chris Blow.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and let me congratulate the member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this debate. This week in the Chamber, I was able to highlight the vital work carried out in my constituency by independent sexual violence advisors who are on the front line tackling increased violence against women and girls. However, not everyone is able to access support when they need it the most. Black and minoritized women, including women with disabilities and from LGBT+ communities, often face further barriers when reporting crimes to the police and accessing support from statutory services, including discrimination, language barriers or immigration status. There is a real need for lived experience to inform the designing of services, ensuring that they are run and by and for marginalised women to provide vital culturally that meets specific support that is often lacking in mainstream services. To give an example of why this support is desperately needed, deaf women are twice as likely to experience domestic violence than hearing women, and deaf children are 3 times more likely than their hearing peers. Many of the perpetrators of this violence are also deaf, meaning survivors are often left isolated even within their own community. Sign Health are the only by and for deaf domestic abuse service, and they provide all their support in British Sign Language. However, deaf domestic abuse services are generally small scale, often with limited staffing and geographical reach, the ultimate postcode lottery. It is vital that deaf women and children have access to support from professionals who speak BSL as a first language, and I hope to see this sort of accessibility consideration in the government's plans for tackling violence against women and girls. Research from the Domestic Abuse Commissioner found that by and for services are 6 times likely less to receive statutory funding, which leads to minoritised women being locked out of support, and recommended that a minimum total of £178 million from the overall funding settlement to be ring-fenced for specialist services led by and for marginalised women. I know that the Minister is the biggest champion we could have in this department. I hope she'll work with organisations like Refuge to make sure specialised services are available for all women.
Yeah. Can I commend everybody who's spoken for keeping their speeches brief, and we now move to the front bench contributions. I call Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I would like to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this crucial debate, and also by paying tribute to the Minister for her work in raising awareness on the tragic cost of violence against women and girls over the last few years. Today, I want to draw attention to an issue that, in my opinion, is a critical front in the overall struggle to end the epidemic of violence against women and girls, an issue that far too often goes underreported, unrecognised and unappreciated. That is the crime of stalking against women and girls, as the Honourable Member for Mid Cheshire has spoken about already. Stalking is a form of psychological violence that will affect approximately 1 in 5 women. It is an insidious crime that can shatter lives. I've heard from stalking victims who feel trapped, too afraid to leave their homes, constantly looking over their shoulder on their way to work. Yes.
Thank you for him for giving way, and I also thank the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this incredibly important debate. Violence against women and girls on trains has risen by 50%, and the British Transport Police figures show that over a third of women using the rail system are likely to be assaulted. This is clearly unacceptable. So with this in mind, would my honourable friend agree with me that a more holistic system is needed to deal with the problem, to help the British Transport Police get a conviction and a suitable conviction for perpetrators, and also increase the perception of safety on our rail network overall?
Can I thank the honourable member, my honourable friend, for her intervention, and I absolutely agree with her comments. Victims of stalking often find themselves cutting ties with loved ones after fear of repercussions and putting them in danger. Even years after the harassment ends, stalking survivors are often left with lingering anxiety, trauma and pain. And in the most extreme cases, stalking can escalate to acts of physical violence, such as rape, and most tragically of all, murder. It is a crime that thrives on control, leaving victims in a constant state of fear and uncertainty. What makes stalking so dangerous is that it is often difficult to detect. A victim may not immediately notice someone following them, watching their movements or infiltrating their personal space online. The harassment might appear subtle at first, but can persist for years, eroding the victim's sense of safety and security. We cannot continue to leave the current legislation on stalking outside of the scope of public debate, because as it stands, the legal framework is just not robust enough for victims. And at a more fundamental level, we must change the way we think and talk about stalking. We must recognise its severity. I've heard harrowing accounts from women who, when they confide in friends, family, or even the police about their experiences, are often met with dismissive responses. Too often, the perpetrator is written off as nothing more than a clingy ex-boyfriend who simply cannot move on. Under the 2012 Protection of Freedoms Act, stalking offences are categorised into two distinct sections, 2A and 4A. These sections have created ambiguity as to how stalking is understood and prosecuted. Under Section 2A, it is defined as pursuing a course of conduct that amounts to stalking. This is considered a lesser offence, carrying a maximum sentence of up to 6 months in prison upon conviction. Under the more severe 4A offence, the perpetrator must be proven to have caused the victim fear of violence, significant alarm, or a harassment which disrupts their daily life. It is clear that there are cracks in this framework. These two separate offences fail to recognise the total scope of stalking and its impact on victims' lives, and there are real barriers to pursuing a Section 4A offence. Victims are often left with the burden of proving the scale and severity of the stalking to convict perpetrators under the Section 4A offence, and they must also meet an unreasonably high threshold of evidence, demonstrating that the crime has disrupted their lives to a terrifying extent just to secure an appropriate sentence for the perpetrator. This process can take years, leaving victims trapped in fear while their tormentors remain at large. The burden placed on victims to provide extensive evidence often leads many pursuing a Section 4A offence to lose faith and withdraw from the criminal justice system altogether. In London alone, the 2024 London Stalking Review found that 45% of stalking victims felt compelled to abandon their pursuit of justice. This just is not good enough. I therefore urge the Government to reform the current legislative framework and take action to address this gap in our justice system. A new, singular and well-defined stalking offence must be created with the victims in mind. We cannot continue to allow years of harassment to persist before victims are able to seek prosecution. The 2024 London Stalking Review revealed another chilling statistic. 39% of recorded stalking offences experienced by under-18s fell under the more serious 4A category, which throws into sharp relief the importance of defining stalking laws as they pertain to social media, which many perpetrators use to harass and exploit young victims online. As I've already said, many young girls may be entirely unaware they are being stalked at first. Disturbingly, the ability of stalkers to hide behind anonymous accounts and leave few digital traces of their stalking is making that worse. It allows stalkers to hide and commit these crimes in ways that can easily be overlooked compared to in-person harassment. I recently met with a brave woman in my constituency who, as a victim of stalking herself, shared her fears about young girls in her family using social media platforms. These platforms enabled her perpetrator to harass her for years. She worries that her family members could fall into similar traps due to lack of awareness around recognising these behaviours. We must urgently raise awareness about how young people, especially girls, are targeted online, educating them, as has been spoken already, in schools about the warning signs of online stalking is critical to preventing this crime from escalating into more severe forms of harassment. So today I've focused on one aspect of violence against women and girls, among many others that demand our attention. I was appalled to read the National Police Chiefs Council and College of Policing national statement, which highlighted the staggering scale of this issue in our country. Every day, 3,000 crimes of violence against women and girls are recorded in this country. This is simply unacceptable, and we should be calling it out for what it is, an epidemic of coercion, control and violence that has no place in our society. I welcome this government's pledge to halve these numbers over the next decade and look forward to working cross-party to explore how myself and the Liberal Democrats can contribute to meaningful changes in the law on stalking and other acts of gendered violence, so that we can, within our lifetimes, stamp out this epidemic once and for all. Because no one can truly be free if they are forced to live in fear. And no woman or girl can live their life to the fullest whilst this scourge goes unchallenged. In the words of the White Ribbon campaigning group, who have done such an admirable job of putting and keeping this issue on the agenda, it starts with men. And the men in this room, myself included, must recognise our responsibility, hold ourselves accountable, challenge the warning signs and dangerous societal norms we see around us, and act now to protect women and girls across our country. Thank you.
Can I now call for the official opposition, Alicia Cairns?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Mark. Can I first pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse, both for bringing this debate, but also for her courage in consistently speaking out on her own experiences. It is an incredibly brave thing to do, and I do hope she's receiving the support that she both deserved but has felt previously has not been forthcoming in the past, because she warrants it. It is vital that women feel able to share our stories, because too often society still attempts to inflict shame on us, as if there is some fault, some responsibility on the survivor. There is not. Male violence against women and girls is an act of cowardice, and every woman in this room, and indeed this country, has a memory which makes us shudder. A moment in time when we felt unsafe or under threat, and those memories stay with us, and they shape us, and we cannot shake them. So it's our duty in this place to do everything we can to prevent future generations from experiencing the same feeling that we all describe differently, but we all know exactly what it is. To give our voices to all survivors, particularly to women like Giselle Pellico, who have stood in strength and demanded that the videos of men raping her were shown in open court. As she said, it is not us that should feel shame, but them, the perpetrators. Male violence is found in our homes, our schools, our universities, outside clubs, in the streets. There is almost no space where it's absent. And I should make clear that I use the term male violence because VAUG excludes the role of the perpetrator. It shifts the focus from the individual who should feel ashamed and guilty to that of women and girls. And indeed, male victims also overwhelmingly experience violence at the hands of other men. Now, much of this violence comes from a sense of entitlement. A man's belief that they have an entitlement to a woman's body or to control her. but they have no entitlement. And I thank all colleagues here today for sharing their experiences and those of their constituents. I would in particular like to mention the Honourable Member for Folkestone, because he is right, there is a crisis of masculinity, and we have to work harder, but it comes from parenting and the decisions that individuals make in their home. Also the member for Rugby who touched on this, and also the comments about the media, and the way that they talk about women, whether it be when they're missing, and it be suggested it be due to their menopause, or whether it's due to an attack that they are facing. It is wrong. I also welcome the Honourable Gentleman from Rugby's comments about women who are deaf, and just how important it is that we make sure... Oh, apologies. Wrong gentleman, same point. I welcome you making those comments. Fighting for girls and women in our communities is one of the most important acts an MP can do, and it breaks my heart every time I meet a victim or survivor. But every time my team and I, especially Lisa, we fight to get those women to safety and to help them navigate the system and secure prosecutions, and we can as MPs. There are people now in prison because MPs have referred cases to the police where they did not have the guts to do so before because they did not feel listened to. So this is an issue where we must work together in the House, and it's an issue the previous government took extremely seriously. And I want to pay particular tribute to Baroness Lady May for her work as both Home Secretary and Prime Minister, to my friend Laura Farris, the former member for Newbury, and the old members for Louth and Horncastle and Maidstone. Over the last 14 years, we've brought in offences to better protect women and bring perpetrators to justice, from stalking to ending the rough sex defence, to the vile sharing of intimate images or revenge porn, to the non-consensual taking of images of a woman breastfeeding and upskirting, while also raising the maximum penalties for harassment. We also supported survivors to give evidence behind closed doors and to be cross-examined without having to wait for trial. And I'm grateful for the own part that I was able to play back in 2012 as a civil servant at the Ministry of Justice, bringing in that first victim service, but also more support for people, particularly from slavery, and also the first domestic abuse service for gay men. We also developed and rolled out Operation Soteria across all police forces in 2023, and the project led to the development of the first national operating model for the investigation of rape and serial sexual offences. And on this matter, I'd be grateful if the Minister can tell me whether she's assessed the performance of the rollout and whether she's going to continue to develop the operation. We also passed the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021, which is world-leading. It created a legal definition of domestic abuse encompassing financial, verbal, emotional abuse, as well as physical and sexual. But it also recognised that abuse is a pattern over time. Importantly, it also recognised that children are explicitly victims if they witness abuse. We relaunched the Flexible Fund in January with a further £2 million investment to help remove barriers to domestic abuse survivors leaving their abusers. So I'd be grateful if the Minister confirmed this funding will continue for this important programme. These actions highlight that we took action that was important, and whilst they were necessary, more still needs to be done. There continues to be an epidemic of male violence in our country and across the world. And it's no surprise when the rape of women, but never of men, is normalised on our TV screens as a storyline. When even in this place, some people diminish their own acts and demonstrate a lack of responsibility for the actions of their past, which serve to re-traumatise the survivors. Globally, women's global rights, bodily rights, are under attack. There is gender apartheid underway in Afghanistan and a femicide taking place in Iran. Knowing the Minister, I'm absolutely certain that she will do everything she can to better protect survivors and to crack down on male perpetrators. If anything, this is her life's work, and I'm pleased she has the opportunity now to lead on that area that she cares so very passionately about. The government's proposal to cut the rate of violence against women and girls in a decade is a significant target that could transform the lives of so many. The Home Secretary stated last week that the policy was ambitious and no other country had said it before. But as I understand it, they're still determining how to measure progress. So I'd be grateful if the Minister can set up precisely what measures and metrics will be used to measure the rate of violence against women and girls. I also welcome the government's focus on spiking over the weekend, the commitment to create a separate criminal offence, which we had hoped to bring forward in the Criminal Justice Bill, and of course we fully support. I would stress to any victims out there, spiking is already a criminal offence, and the reason for creating a new spiking offence is so that we can better understand the picture of spiking nationally and get more prosecutions. Because at the moment, the police are recording it as an offence against a person, as sexual violence or assault, and that means we can't make interventions that need to be taken. There are a few other issues where I'd be grateful if the Minister could share her thoughts with us, and the first has been touched on by some others, the prevalence of violent porn and its impact on young boys and men. The increasing normalisation of violence during sex for young people worries me greatly. The viewing figures of porn are concerningly high, with children being exposed to this content without searching for it, and even porn depicting rape. Now, whilst the Online Harm Bill goes some way to better protect children, The access obviously continues into adulthood and continues to shape the attitudes and behaviours of young men. So what actions is the Minister considering working across government to tackle this content? Can I finish, Sir Mark, by thanking all those organisations across our country, but particularly in Rutland, Stamford and the South Kesteven and Harbour villages for all you do to protect and support women and girls from violence. But I also want to finish by thanking my father and ultimately all those fathers out there who were the ultimate feminists and who raised me and women across this country to believe that violence has no role in relationships or in the home. Shame lies with the perpetrator alone, and we must never accept status quo while women and girls continue to suffer. Thank you.
I call the Minister, Jess Phillips.
I thank, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Sir Mark. And I thank the Honourable Lady for her impassioned speech, which I am following. I must, though, give the biggest credit today to the member for Poplar and Limehouse for bringing forward this debate on such an important issue, and to say that I have handled a lot of cases in my life. I have seen almost every single way that a system gets used to control, whether it's our court systems, the systems that are meant to be there to protect us could be used against a victim in a patriarchal system. And I have never seen one that actually could compare to the case that she has spoken so bravely about, where even our very democracy could be used to seek for a perpetrator to control. And so it takes a huge amount, like Giselle Pellicott, whose name has been mentioned today, it takes a huge amount of bravery to try and shift the shame elsewhere and keep speaking up. And it has been a pleasure to work with her over the years, and long may it continue. So I'm going to do a thing that I have to say hasn't always been the case when I've been on the other side of this, is I'm going to try and answer the questions that you asked me. So, yeah, it's not always been my experience. So please do bear with me if I jump around a little bit. First and foremost, to the comments made by the member for Poplar and Limehouse, she is exactly right, that it is only by making this an everybody's problem, and by everybody, and others have mentioned the issue of silo government, I mean every government department. I was joking this morning that I'm struggling to make it be about solar panels, but give me time. But this will only, and to the honourable lady from the opposition, what I would say is that her government did have a very good track record of changing legislation. What didn't change at the same pace was the systematic processes that need to be put in place to ensure that that legislation could mean something on the ground. I have to say, today we launched the domestic abuse protection orders, something that her government had when in government they passed into law. And 3 years after the fact, the first one was handed out this morning. It's going to take a huge amount, and a lot of different government departments and a lot of different people having the will to make things happen. And so my honourable friend from Poplar and Limehouse is exactly right about, and a cross-government strategy can't just be a piece of paper that sits on a shelf and we go, yes, we've ticked that box. It actually has to be targeted, and it has to really have the will of everybody. And so that is what we will do, as she said, and we will announce that it will be out next year. A number of people, including the Honourable Lady, mentioned the issue of non-contact sexual offences being of concern. Obviously, the Angelini review following the death of Sarah Everard had a huge amount of recommendations in part one with regard to how the police handle non-contact sexual offences. This was also membered by the member for Rugby, and how, frankly, it is, well, it's not good enough, is it? Currently, it's woeful. And I picked up a case just this morning, funnily enough, where, you know, the fact that somebody's sending you images of them naked, I won't use the colloquial term, even though I'm sure everybody would expect me to normally. I'm a government minister now. But that these things have to be taken seriously. The Home Office is also looking into exactly what evidence there is in the escalation of non-contact sexual violence to contact sexual violence, because that evidence base doesn't currently exist, even though common sense amongst all of us would assume so. We need to ensure that we are continuing to work on that. The issue of migrant women came up a number of times. The member for Folkestone raised it, as well as the member for Poplar and Limehouse. And I think quite astutely, the member for Folkestone reminds me of all the things that I have said in the past on this issue. And now I find myself in a different position as somebody very much with my heart exactly in the same place. And so the area of how migrant women are supported in our country is one that we are currently giving huge attention to. And I don't care what stamp is in your passport. If you have been abused on these shores, you deserve protection on these shores. And that is what we will continue to strive for. The member for Strangford is right. I have a special interest in, not that I don't love Wales and Scotland as well, because I do, but my father, who also raised me to be a feminist, makes my loyalty to Northern Ireland a tiny bit stronger maybe than elsewhere. Yeah, I absolutely will.
I just thought I'd share with the lady, because I think she will welcome it as well, member for Strangford, that the Northern Ireland Select Committee will be doing specific hearings on violence against women and girls in Northern Ireland in the next few months. So I'm sure we will share both of them the outcomes of those hearings.
Yes. Yes, I had heard that from the chair, and I am very pleased. And also the Northern the now finally formed government of Northern Ireland. We all were delighted to see when that happened. One of their top priorities, in not a long list for government, is violence against women and girls. And so I will be going over in January to work with the devolved government and the PSNI, and just really see how we can help each other to make it better, because there is something about women's experiences in post-conflict, and lots of people have mentioned today conflict zones, and actually the experience of violence against women in conflict zones and then post-conflict is often something that doesn't get discussed about when we're talking about peace treaties, actually, and what needs to be put in place to rebuild infrastructure. So we mustn't lose sight of that either. So I will be going over, and again, keeping on the international stage, the MP for Norwich North said it might not be my area to talk with regard to Malala Yousafzai, and so I take this moment to shamelessly say it is literally my area, because I am her Member of Parliament, and feel pretty proud that it was my city who took Malala in when she really needed refuge. And so I once had to lecture her school class about activism and how to be better activists, and this was after she had won the Nobel Peace Prize. So that was a moment in my life I felt slight shame in, but I hope they took something away. But I met with Malala recently on this very issue, the very issue mentioned as well by the Honourable Lady opposite, with regard to the experiences of women in Afghanistan and the regime that they are, well, I can't even say living under, the regime they are under. And in fact, I saw some of her people yesterday, and we'll be continuing those conversations. And when I met with her, it was with FCDO ministers. So those conversations are ongoing. To the issue of funding, which was mentioned by many, many people, specifically to mention the member for Lowestoft in her comments about a statutory duty with regard to funding, we will not, and actually this links to the point about Cheshire. What I saw when I went to Cheshire Police, as the Honourable Member pointed out when we went together, what I saw an NHS funded posts, I saw probation funded posts and police funded posts and Police and Crime Commissioner funded posts, sitting in a room together working tirelessly to ensure, and in London in the Metropolitan Police and just only 2 other areas, to his point about it spreading out. We will, like, it's all well and good the government saying, oh, I'm going to have this fund and that fund. We will never solve this issue unless we make it specifically that violence against women and girls is mainstreamed into the funding programmes in every locality, in every government department. This cannot just be a nice to have on International Women's Day. And the example in Cheshire is a fantastic one, so we know it can work elsewhere. And so this is about government seeing what levers it can pull to ensure that that can happen. I absolutely will.
Many social workers, police officers have kind hearts and do great practice. How is the government going to reach out to encourage their best practice while at the same time dealing with the bad practice?
It makes a very, very important point, because absolutely, trusting police officers comes up quite a lot, and the member for Poplar and Limehouse talked about how trust was at its lowest. And what I would say is that the women I have worked with over the years don't have the privilege of being able to have an alternative but to trusting them. They have to, because that's the option in most of their cases. And so we have to work to make sure that, you're right, we don't demoralise the workforce and review after review, this after that. It does sometimes demoralise people and make it so a sort of checkbox of, I did everything I should have, rather than, are you all right, love, being the response. And so you're absolutely right, we will have the government will have a fierce regime for standards in policing, but always celebrate. This morning I was in the Honourable, I wasn't in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, but I was with his borough command as his area in Sutton and Cheam will be having the rollout, one of the first areas to have the domestic abuse protection orders. And I met dedicated staff from Sutton Council who work on domestic abuse, but also the officers working in that borough command to make sure that this happened. And you couldn't have asked for better examples of police officers, totally dedicated. So we need to do both things. You have to celebrate the good, punish the bad. To the member for Scarborough and Whitby on Anna's case, I just want to say, and I'm sure my officials will get sort of annoyed at me doing this every time, I'm personally happy to help Anna. I can't listen to that story and not think something has to be done about her specific case, but actually I can't just change it for Anna. We have to change it for everybody. We have to make sure that those stories, I don't want to sit through those stories for the next 5 years, but that is going to take quite a lot of time. To the Honourable Lady, I've got this a little bit, employment. A number of people mentioned employment, and I would welcome having a conversation, as I have many times, with the Honourable Lady about exactly what she is seeking to achieve. The violence against women and girls strategy that is cross-government will absolutely, women having a role in the... I mean, we do go to work. That feels like all I do. But women being safe at work was one of the things that she and I, whilst we were fighting for the domestic abuse protection orders, in fact, to cover a woman's workplace when we were back on the domestic abuse bill committee together. I'm more than happy to work with her, and workers' rights and how we deal with people's employment will absolutely be part of a government strategy. And to the member for Ilford, talking about Zara Alina, a family who I know well and have worked with over the years, we absolutely have to make sure that we cannot tell the same story. And actually the story of Zara Alina and her perpetrator, as he mentioned, the failings in her case show the exact thing I'm saying about a crippled system. You can make a better law. You can make the rules, but this system of probation had been so crippled that this is the outcome of that. And I feel immense upset about her case. Lots of you mentioned education, and somebody asked me directly if I speak to the Department for Education. Between me and my officials, I'm going to say it's daily. I would say, aside from the Ministry of Justice and Minister Davies-Jones, I'm going to say her name in here, the member for Pontypridd, who work together very, very closely. The department we work, this mission focuses on the most is the Department for Education, because prevention, all the members who've spoken about boys, the member for Milton Keynes, the harrowing, as the mother of sons myself, the harrowing stories of boys' attitudes is undoubtedly, we have got to prevent this. I'm sick of just putting bigger plasters on cuts. We have got to work very, very closely on prevention and also on perpetrator work to prevent those who are already showing signs and also escalating. And we absolutely will do that. To answer the Honourable Lady opposite, the Operation Soteria, actually having rolled out, it is in January it goes into a particular new phase where police forces have to tell us how exactly they're going to be doing it. There is no proposed end to Operation Soteria. I continue to see its benefits and work closely with the academics who and the police forces that did that, that undertook the work. On the point of view of measurements, the overarching measurements that we will seek to use will just be one thing. I refuse to make a target and miss a point. And so it's quite easy to duke stats, isn't it, anyway? There will be many different metrics that sit underneath the overarching measure, which, the exercise in exactly what that measure will be is currently ongoing, but currently the measure that is used in this instance would be the Crime Survey of England and Wales. But you have to look at many other metrics, whether they're attitudinal, whether they're femicide, whether they're issues around delivery in schools, whatever those metrics are. And so we are working, and it's not just the Home Office that is doing this. Every government department is currently away, busily working on what their metrics might be. So it's the measurements will, when properly announced, I am determined to make sure they don't just hit a target and miss a point. On the flexible fund programme, obviously, I'm not going to commit to any funding, particularly that anybody has asked me about today, just because I literally can't, because that process is currently ongoing. But I have absolutely seen the value of the Flea Fund over the years, and the pornography review is due, I think, very early in next year. Obviously, started by the previous government, and we will be working. And as she says, the online safety bill only goes so far. I saw, and I don't know how apocryphal this is, so if I am misleading the House, I apologise. I saw Pornhub, some news article saying that Pornhub had said that they'd found some sort of workaround of being part of the online safety bill by they were somehow going to make out like they weren't a pornography site. So I assume we'll all be going on to Pornhub later to, buy books, is it? Is that what they are offering? But the graphic use of pornography in society has been absolutely, it has caused many of the things that people have talked about. I will just finish by saying I have all these things that I'm meant to have said that the government is going to do and is currently doing. I think I've said most of them in the answer to most of the questions. But today I wanted to cry whilst I was with the police force in South London, because it felt like the use of the domestic abuse protection orders, something we had waited for so long, as the first one was handed out and the police officer was so delighted, I felt like a new dawn was coming.
Okay, in the minute that's left, I'll call on Afsana Begum to give a wind-up.
Thank you, Sir Mark. I just want to thank the Minister for her comments today and her ongoing work in this area and reiterate my commitment to work with her constructively in the interests of survivors everywhere. I'm most grateful for all 20 contributions today on a range of topics and providing insight from all over the UK, including Northern Ireland, as the Honourable Member for Strangford mentioned and emphasised, emphasising the scale of the problem and the wide-ranging impacts this issue has. This week and next, as we raise awareness through events in Parliament, events in our constituencies and debates such as this, I think that whilst it's important, we do so with a sense of sadness at the loss and tragedy and anger at the injustice. We also have resolve, I hope, and hope as well for the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, the question is that this House has considered the matter of tackling violence against women and girls. As many of us of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary? I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order. There's another debate about to start. Can I ask those who were in the previous debate to try and vacate the room as quickly as possible so we can start the next debate? How long is this one? 30 minutes.